My mother-in-law made up a story that I was cheating on my husband, but she couldn't imagine what I had been hiding since before he even met me. I married the man who made me believe that love was still possible. But along with him came Nicole, a mother-in-law determined to destroy everything I had tried to rebuild. She humiliated me, accused me, and nearly made me give up on myself. But what she didn't know was that I was keeping a secret that not even my own family was aware of. A secret that could either set me free or destroy me for good. Today, I am living proof that not even the deepest wounds can stop us from flourishing when we have the courage to face the truth. I'm so glad you're here. Read my story to the end and comment with the city you're following from. I want to know how far this journey has reached. Nicole arrived unannounced. Her strong perfume filled the room even before her voice cut through the space with that condescending tone. She barely looked me in the eye, preferring to comment on the flowers in the living room as if I were invisible. Andrew, standing beside me, tried to maintain a tense smile but didn't say a word when she mentioned, once again, that some people weren't raised for certain environments. The weight of the humiliation was as familiar as it was unbearable. I sat rigidly, trying to maintain my posture. Each of her sentences seemed carefully crafted to hurt me without sounding directly offensive. "Do you cook, Amanda?" Andrew has always had a refined palate. I smiled with only my lips swallowing hard. Everything inside me wanted to react, but I learned early on that screaming wouldn't save me. I needed to control my pain so it wouldn't turn into more ammunition against me. Andrew was uncomfortable, I could tell. His foot tapped nervously, his hands intertwined. But he didn't interrupt her, didn't try to defend me. Nicole, satisfied with her silent victory, raised an eyebrow and shot me a triumphant look. It was as if she was testing my limits, waiting for me to break down in front of him. But I wouldn't give her that pleasure. When she left, the silence lingered. We were both sitting in the same space but in different worlds. I waited for him to say something, anything. But Andrew just lowered his eyes and muttered that she didn't mean to be malicious. My hope for a moment wavered. I was alone on that battlefield. Andrew remained silent. And that silence hurt more than any word. That night, I went to Lisa's house. She was my only bridge to a world where I could breathe. Sitting on her living room floor, with a warm cup of tea in my hands, I finally let a few tears escape. Lisa listened to everything in silence, as she always did, without judging, without interrupting. Her steady gaze told me she understood far more than I could explain. "You're afraid he'll leave you, aren't you?" she asked. I hesitated before answering. Fear was too small a word for the terror that consumed me. Abandonment wasn't a possibility. It was a constant shadow that crawled inside me long before Andrew. Lisa knew my wounds, even the ones I never named out loud. I tried to justify his silence, to rationalize Nicole's behavior. But Lisa looked at me with that firm expression only true friends have when they want to save us from ourselves. "You need to set boundaries, Amanda. And he needs to choose." I trembled. Loving for me had always felt more like fear than comfort. Relying on someone was a surrender my heart didn't fully know how to make. But when Lisa held my hand, I felt a little courage break through the wall surrounding me. She squeezed my hand. "You don't have to face this alone." Days later, in Dr. Hayes' office, the words came out heavier than usual. I felt exhausted, as if I were carrying the world on my own. "He doesn't know anything, doctor. Not about the before. About who I was before him." Dr. Hayes looked at me calmly, unhurriedly, as he always did when he knew I was about to touch on something dangerous. I wanted to run, but I had already gone too far. The memories came in flashes. The institution, the cold hallways, the curious eyes of strangers who never knew what truly happened to me. The episode that led me there was a vicious cycle in my mind, playing on a loop. It was easier to pretend it never existed. That I had always been this strong woman Andrew met. He loves me for who he thinks I am. What if he finds out? What if he knows what I did to survive? The choked voice escaped before I could contain it. I had never said that out loud. Maybe because naming the pain made it real again. And real was a place I avoided with all my might. Dr. Hayes didn't answer right away. He just jotted something in his notebook and said, "You are not what happened to you, Amanda. But hiding it might make you forget who you really are." I wanted to believe him, but guilt was still a chain locked around my ankle. "I haven't told him, doctor." I haven't told him anything about what happened before. If Nicole knew, she would destroy me with it. And maybe that's why I still can't sleep. Nicole returned a few days later, as if she owned the house, my house. She was smiling, holding a box of French cookies, as if the venom she had spread during her last visit had never happened. But this time the target was more direct. Amanda, did Andrew tell you he met other women who were much more compatible before you? I took a deep breath but remained motionless. Her game was to provoke, to poke, to destabilize. And she played it well. Soon after, between sips of tea, she let it slip. It's just that. Everyone has a past, don't they? I hope yours isn't the kind that haunts the family. My trembling hand held the teacup, but my face remained impassive. She knew nothing. But she spoke like someone who sensed something. Andrew smiled awkwardly and looked away once again. Every word she spoke was a threat wrapped in courtesy. And the worst part was that, even without proof, she knew how to target my insecurities. How could she sniff out what I fought so hard to hide? A part of me wanted to scream. Another wanted to disappear. But I stayed there, bleeding on the inside, silent on the outside. Nicole said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek that burned like acid. Andrew walked her to the door and I heard her say softly, "Stay alert, son. Certain masks fall off with time." My stomach churned. She was playing dirty. And I knew this was just the beginning. How could she suspect if I hid it so well? After that day, Andrew grew more distant. His eyes would seek mine, but they seemed confused, as if searching for something he couldn't name. When I tried to talk, he sighed and said, "She's my mother, Amanda. You need to try to understand." My heart sank. Try to understand what? The contempt? The insinuations? The disguised cruelty? I tried to show him that Nicole was crossing lines, but Andrew seemed torn. He didn't want fights, he wanted peace. Peace at the expense of my sanity. I felt increasingly alone, as if I were being pushed out of the life I had built with him. The walls of our home seemed to watch me in silence, like accomplices to the growing distance between us. I remembered Lisa saying he would have to choose. But how does someone choose between their wife and their mother without carrying guilt? I understood his ties, but who would understand my cuts? I stood there, next to a man who loved me but didn't know how to protect me. And perhaps he didn't even realize how much I needed it. That night, we slept facing opposite sides of the bed. The silence between us was a muffled scream. I wanted to call out to him, but I swallowed the words. Once again, the fear of loss overrode the will to fight. And that was eating me up inside. She's my mother, Amanda. You need to try to understand. That's when I started writing. Loose pages hidden in the back of my desk drawer. Every word was a pain I couldn't speak out loud. I wrote letters to no one, perhaps to myself. As if venting on paper was the only way to keep my sanity intact. The shaky handwriting betrayed what my face tried to hide. I wrote about Nicole, about Andrew, about the days I felt like a walking mistake. But I also wrote about the good days, trying to remember they existed. Each letter was a silent scream, a confession I would never have the courage to make out loud. I needed to record it. If not for others, then at least so I wouldn't forget myself. Sometimes after finishing a letter I would reread it all and cry. Other times, I would just put the ink-stained pages away without the courage to face them. They were words too intimate to be shared, but too urgent to remain silent. And there was a strange relief in that. No one could know. Not even Lisa. Those letters were like mirrors of my soul. And I didn't want anyone to see how broken I was inside. It was my secret. My hiding place. My way of resisting. Words that would never be spoken aloud, but that burned within. If those letters ever came to light, everything would change. Absolutely everything. It was at a coffee shop near work that fate played one of its tricks on me. I was in line, distracted, when I heard that familiar voice call my name. It was Tom, Andrew's brother. For a moment my body froze. That unexpected presence took the air from my lungs. I smiled mechanically, but inside, everything in me was screaming. Tom seemed carefree, as if we were just cordial acquaintances. He talked about work, mentioned Andrew, and said he missed the family gatherings. I nodded, trying to maintain my composure, but my hands were sweating. He had no idea how much his face took me back to a past I pretended to have buried. Or maybe he knew and was pretending just as well as I was. My memories with him weren't linear. They were flashes, sensations, and anguish trapped between my ribs. After that day I was never the same. Tom, however, went on with his life. Maybe because he never understood the weight of what happened to me because of his negligence. Or maybe because he chose not to take responsibility. I couldn't stay there for long. I made up an excuse and left before the right or wrong words could escape me. As I walked away, my heart pounded. His presence had rekindled something I had tried to forget for years. And now that past was knocking at my door. The last time I saw Tom, I still couldn't look anyone in the eye. Years ago, it all started on an ordinary night. We were at a university party and Tom promised to walk me back, but he got distracted with friends. I waited, but when he didn't show up, I decided to go alone. The walk was short, but with every step, my body filled with tension. The street was dark, and I felt I wasn't alone. A strange man approached with intentions my instinct recognized immediately. I froze and all I could do was run. I don't know how I made it to the dorm, but when I locked the door behind me, I collapsed. There was no physical assault, but the trauma destroyed me from the inside out. I had such a severe crisis that I needed psychiatric care. I was hospitalized for weeks. The diagnosis: post-traumatic stress disorder. No one in my family knew exactly what happened, and I didn't tell them. Not even when Tom asked if I was okay. I replied that I was, with a fragile smile. I was ashamed. Ashamed of having trusted, of being left alone, of being weak. The image of that street, the footsteps behind me, the sound of his breathing. It was all seared into my memory like fire. For a long time I thought it was my fault. Now I see that Tom left me vulnerable, even if unintentionally. But the effect was devastating. And the worst part is, he never knew. He was there that night. And I never told anyone. In the next session with Dr. Hayes, the weight of the memory was still crushing me. I told him everything in a broken voice, my eyes fixed on the floor. He listened in silence, like someone holding a vase about to shatter. When I finished, I felt that something inside me had broken again. And yet it was as if it needed to break to be rebuilt. Dr. Hayes took a deep breath before speaking. You've carried this for far too long. Keeping this secret is consuming your vital energy. You don't have to face this alone. I knew he was right. But there was so much fear. Fear that Andrew wouldn't understand. Fear that Tom would deny it. Fear that Nicole would use it against me. What if I tell them and lose everything? I asked. Dr. Hayes looked me firmly in the eyes. And what if you don't tell them and lose yourself? Those words echoed inside me. It was the first time I felt that the truth wasn't just a memory. It was also a choice. I went home with a heavy heart. I felt that something inevitable was approaching, like a wave about to drag me away, and there I was standing at the edge. A quiet courage was growing, but also a deep sadness. What would happen after everything was said out loud? Keeping this in will break you, Amanda. And you know it. But telling them could also make me lose everything. Nicole arrived early that morning, with a cake in her hands and poison on her lips. Andrew, surprised by the visit, didn't notice the intention behind her smile. While I made coffee, she waited for the right moment to attack. Andrew just needed to leave the room for an instant. Amanda has been very busy lately, hasn't she? Have you ever wondered who she spends so much time with? The tone was casual, but the words cut like ice. I tried to stay calm, but each insinuation was like a thorn digging deeper. I saw her going into a building downtown. Alone? Maybe not. My heart raced, not from guilt, but from fear of what she was planting. Nicole knew how to play with half-truths, and that was worse than a direct lie. It was enough to raise doubts, but never enough to be unmasked. Andrew returned and she changed the subject, as if nothing had been said. But I already knew. He would notice. She had left the seed there, between his eyes and my presence. It was subtle but effective. I saw a shadow in his expression that hadn't been there before. Nicole didn't need to say much to cause destruction. Later, Andrew was distant. He pretended everything was fine, but it wasn't true. He asked where I had gone last Tuesday. I said I went to an appointment as always. He nodded, but without conviction. Nicole had gotten what she wanted, to drive a wedge between us. She's not who you think she is, Nicole whispered. At the end of the day, Andrew was waiting for me in the living room. He wasn't angry, but something in his eyes had changed. My mom mentioned some things, and I wanted to know if you have anything to tell me. The world seemed to stop for a second. I didn't expect a direct accusation, but this was worse. It was a crack. A doubt. A test. I explained about my appointments, my routine, what I had been doing. But he seemed to weigh every word, looking for flaws. It's not that I think you would do something like that. But she doesn't usually make things up for no reason. Those words pierced me. She did exactly that, Andrew. It was what she always did. But you still couldn't see it. I tried to touch his hand, but he pulled away slightly. Not out of anger. Out of uncertainty. That hurt more. The man who swore to trust me was allowing doubt to settle in. I wasn't innocent in everything, but not in this. And yet, I was already being judged in silence. There was no argument. He just stood up and said he needed some time to think. I sat there, feeling the distance widen between us like a chasm. Not because of something I did, but because of what Nicole wanted him to believe. And that was devastating me. Even if he didn't believe it, he couldn't ignore what he heard. After he left, the house felt empty again. I sat in the corner of the room and cried silently. The pain wasn't just from the accusation, but from the feeling of helplessness. Nicole was winning, little by little, without even raising her voice. And I was losing everything I had worked so hard to achieve. I looked at the closet where I hid my letters. I thought about rereading one, but I knew it would be like opening a wound. Instead, I hugged my knees and tried to find some comfort in myself. All I had in that moment was my own pain. And it was too big to fit into words. The night fell and I didn't turn on the lights. I stayed in the dark, listening to the sounds of the street and my own ragged breathing. Every heartbeat was a reminder of how much I wanted to give up. But I couldn't. I had been through worse. And I survived. I stood up slowly, wiped my eyes and went to the kitchen. I needed water, air, anything to remind me that the world was still turning. But inside me everything was still. Still and about to collapse. I felt like the world was about to fall apart. But he hadn't seen my letters. Not yet. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, and it was Lisa. Her voice was fast, full of urgency. Amanda, do you have a minute? I found something out about Nicole. I felt my heart race, as it always did when her name was mentioned. Lisa explained that out of curiosity and suspicion. She looked for the building downtown Nicole claimed to have seen me enter. There was nothing there but professional offices, among them Dr. Hayes. My mind was spinning. How could she have the nerve to invent something so cruel? And worse, how could Andrew doubt me based on such a flimsy lie? Lisa also discovered that Nicole had never even been on that street that week. It was all a fabrication to push me away. The pain of being the target of so much manipulation mixed with an acidic kind of relief. I wasn't crazy. She wants to destroy you, Amanda. And she won't stop as long as Andrew believes her. Those words echoed inside me. Lisa had always been the voice of reason when I doubted myself. She promised to send me proof of what she found. I needed to face this with evidence. And face not only Nicole but also my past. While waiting for the files, I couldn't hold back the tears. Why did she hate me so much? Why did my existence seem to threaten hers? Andrew deserved to know who his mother really was, but a part of me still feared breaking something irreparable. Still, I knew. The truth, however painful, was my only way forward. She called me in a hurry. There's something you need to see. The next day I decided to talk to Tom. I asked him to meet me at a quiet cafe, where the past couldn't listen in so loudly. He seemed confused, but he agreed. When we sat down, I didn't wait to get straight to the point. Do you remember that night at the university? The party? You promised to walk me back, but you didn't show up. Tom frowned. I vaguely remember. I drank too much. Why? My breath caught. Because that night I was followed. I ran for my life. I was traumatized for years. And you left me alone. His silence was a confession. He put his hands to his face, muttering that he had no idea what had happened. Exactly. No one knew. Not even Andrew. But you were there, and you left me vulnerable. He tried to justify himself, saying he was young, irresponsible. But words couldn't fix what had been shattered. I didn't want to punish him. I just wanted him to know the impact of his choices. Tom was silent for long seconds. There was nothing left to say. The damage was done, and now it was exposed. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the flood of emotions. But for the first time, I felt that something had been released within me. It was you that night. I remember now. It was only then that I noticed Andrew standing at the cafe door. I don't know how much he heard, but I saw the shock on his face. His eyes locked on mine, then on Tom. He walked in slowly without saying anything. He sat at the edge of the table, like someone arriving at a fire and trying to figure out where it started. Amanda, is this true? All of it. His voice came out weak, almost inaudible. I just nodded. Tom didn't have the courage to face his brother. The silence was heavy. Andrew seemed to be mentally piecing together things that had never made sense. Pieces that now formed a clear and terrible picture. He stood up, walked to the exit without another word. My heart pounded. I wanted to run after him, to explain, to scream that I had tried to protect him from this. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the pain of finally letting the truth come out. Tom stood up too, speechless. And I was left there alone. The empty chair where Andrew had been was a perfect reflection of what I felt inside. The silence was now a scream. His eyes, wide, were no longer filled with doubt. They were filled with horror. He didn't say anything. He just walked out the door without looking back. Andrew came home the next day with a closed-off face and hollow eyes. He didn't say anything at first, but the tension in his body signaled the hurricane that was about to hit. He grabbed the car keys and said only, "I need to talk to my mother." I didn't stop him. I knew this moment was inevitable. Nicole had planted many seeds, and finally, she would reap what she sowed. Hours later, I received a text from him. "I'm at her house." My heart tightened. Imagining him face to face with Nicole, exposing every lie, every manipulation, was both painful and liberating. Andrew was kind, but he wasn't foolish. And when the truth presented itself, he knew how to be firm. That conversation would change everything between them. Forever. Nicole tried to deflect as always, but Andrew had proof. He had my raw pain. He had the words he heard from Tom, Lisa's findings. Why, Mom? Why destroy the woman I love? She tried to say it was for his protection, that I was hiding things. But he was no longer listening to excuses. For the first time, he saw her for who she was. "I trusted you, and you tried to make me doubt Amanda. My feelings are not a toy, Mom." Nicole fell silent. For the first time, she was without an argument. The lie had come to an end. Andrew didn't yell, but his words cut deeper than any shout ever could. "The truth always comes back, Mom. Always." The argument was already over when Nicole stood up quickly, trying to regain control. "I will not be disrespected in my own house," she yelled. But the heel of her shoe caught on the staircase rug. The next movement was too fast to avoid. She fell. A scream pierced the air, followed by a dull thud. Andrew ran, desperate, calling her name. Nicole lay at the bottom of the stairs, unconscious, her body strange and far too still. The scene was absurd. The woman who had always seemed indestructible was now fragile, vulnerable, exposed. The ambulance arrived quickly. As the paramedics attended to her, Andrew trembled. I met him at the hospital, his hands cold and his eyes lost. "She's going to survive," the doctor said. But there were fractures and the recovery would be long. That fall wasn't just physical. It was the symbolic collapse of the empire Nicole had built on lies. We waited in silence. No one dared to speak about what happened before the fall. The house of cards had crumbled, and here were its ruins. The irony of it all was glaring. At the very moment Andrew finally freed himself from her, she became dependent on him. A scream. A dull thud. Silence. In the hospital room I saw Nicole unconscious, connected to machines, her face pale and fragile. Something inside me twisted. I could have walked away. I could have let others take care of her. But I did the opposite. I went in, took her hand, and promised she wouldn't be alone. Even after everything. Andrew watched me from the corner of the room in silence. He didn't immediately understand why I was there. I wasn't sure myself. Maybe because, despite everything, I didn't want her to feel what I had felt for so many years. Abandonment. I knew what it was like to need help and not have it. And ironically, that made me stay. Days later, she woke up. She opened her eyes with difficulty, confused. When she saw me by her bedside, she blinked as if to make sure. I smiled gently, trying to convey a calm I didn't possess myself. You fell. But you're safe now. She didn't respond. She just looked at me with something that resembled surprise. Nicole tried to speak but stopped. For the first time there were no insults, no contempt. Just a silent acknowledgement. I don't know if it was gratitude. Maybe it was just perplexity. But in that instant something between us changed. And that was stronger than any spoken word. She opened her eyes and saw it was me. The daughter-in-law she never wanted. Even injured, Nicole wouldn't lower her guard. But neither would I. I had left my purse on the table in the hospital room, in a rush to get Nicole some water. I didn't realize that one of the letters had slipped out from among the papers. When I returned, I found Nicole with her eyes fixed on the page, her trembling hands holding my rawest secret. I was paralyzed. It was one of the letters I wrote to endure the pain, words never meant for other eyes. My first instinct was to snatch the paper from her hands, but I restrained myself. I watched as she read. Nicole, so haughty, was now immersed in my most vulnerable words. The room fell completely silent, as if the world had held its breath along with me. She said nothing, but her expression changed, as if she were seeing something she never expected to find. Her eyes lifted slowly, still fixed on me. No judgment, no outrage. Just the look of someone caught off guard. The letter spoke of abandonment, of fear, of the pain of not being accepted. It was more than just venting. It was a piece of my soul. And now it was in her hands. I remained standing, waiting for the storm. But she just folded the paper and placed it aside. Her face was paler than usual, and there was something restrained in her posture, as if she had lost her breath. I expected an attack. But what came was the unexpected. Her eyes scanned each line as if searching for ammunition. Nicole didn't speak immediately. She stared at the ceiling for a few minutes, as if digesting every word of the letter in silence. Then, without looking at me, she murmured, "I never imagined you felt all of this." Her voice was weak, almost human. For the first time, she seemed genuinely touched by something that came from me. I approached slowly, still wary. "It was just for me. I write so I don't explode." She nodded, but she didn't apologize or try to justify anything. She just absorbed it. The silence between us was heavy, but not hostile. It was as if we were in new territory without maps. Nicole, the woman who always had a sharp retort, was now made of pauses. "If I had known," she began but didn't finish the sentence. Something stopped her. Maybe pride, maybe guilt. Or maybe both. I didn't need a full confession. That moment of vulnerability was more than I had ever hoped to have. I took a deep breath, feeling a thread of hope emerge. We didn't talk anymore that day. But when I left the room, she was still holding the letter gently. As if, for the first time, she understood there was more to me than she had allowed herself to see. "The silent war between us may have found a truce. I never imagined you felt all of this," she said, her voice lower than usual. That same week, Nicole had an emotional crisis. It wasn't physical, but one of those internal storms that bend us from the inside. I arrived at the hospital to find her with a glazed look in her eyes, breathing with difficulty. Her hands clutched the sheets as if they were her only anchor. The doctor said it was anxiety, but I recognized it. It was terror. Without thinking, I took her hand. No one else was there. She looked at me, startled, but didn't pull away. "Breathe with me," I whispered. We did it together, in silence for several minutes. Slowly, her shoulders relaxed, her gaze softened. It was like watching a fortress crumble. And in its place, a fragile, real woman emerged. When the crisis passed, she kept my hand in hers. There were no thanks, but there was no hostility either. Just a silent connection. I looked her in the eyes and smiled. For the first time, I felt she saw me not as a threat, but as a human being. I left the room with a heavy heart, but it was different. Nicole hadn't changed overnight, but there were cracks in her armor. And it was through those cracks that the possibility of something new could enter. Maybe empathy. Maybe regret. Or maybe just humanity. Perhaps for the first time she truly saw me. But nothing could have prepared us for what would happen at the family dinner. Chapter 8: The Secret. The dining room was immaculate, as if every detail had been arranged to hide the cracks beneath the surface. The Walker family gathered, plates aligned, glasses gleaming under the soft light. Nicole was there, pale but composed, as if nothing had happened in the past few weeks. Andrew held my hand under the table and whispered, "They need to hear your side of the story." My heart pounded as if trying to escape from me. Everyone was making small talk, avoiding eye contact. But Andrew cleared his throat and said firmly, "Amanda would like to share something with everyone." A heavy silence fell. Nicole slowly raised her eyes. I knew that moment would change everything. And still I took a deep breath. I stood up from my chair as if the weight of years accompanied my shoulders. I looked at each face around the table. Some were curious, others suspicious. Before I met Andrew, there was a time in my life that I kept silent. Out of fear. Out of shame. But that silence has been corroding me every day. There was no turning back. Every word would be a brick tearing down the wall I had built around myself. And though I was trembling, I continued. For the first time, my voice was at peace with the pain. "They need to hear your side of the story," he said. I told them about the night at the university, the fear, the crisis. I spoke of the hospitalization, the sleepless nights, the diagnoses I had hidden for so long. Every detail came out of my mouth with weight, but also with relief. No one interrupted. Nicole kept her eyes locked on me without blinking. I write letters because I can't say out loud what hurts me. I kept all of this hidden because I thought that if Andrew knew, he would see me differently. Lesser. I looked at him and his eyes were welling up. It was as if my pain was finally being accepted, validated, honored. When I mentioned Tom, the room seemed to freeze. He said nothing. No one did. But the truth hung between everyone, dense, uncomfortable. I didn't come here to ask for pity. I came to ask you to stop judging me without knowing my story. To see me completely, and not just the parts that are convenient for you. Nicole stood up, trembling. For a moment, I thought she was going to attack me. But her expression was different. "My son," she murmured, more to herself than to the others. For the first time, I saw something in her I never imagined. Uncertainty. Fragility. Perhaps remorse. Nicole stood up, trembling. "My son?" When I finished, I sat back down, but my legs barely responded. Andrew squeezed my hand tightly. No one spoke. It was as if everyone was absorbing what had just happened. The weight of what had been revealed was too great to be ignored. And still I didn't regret it. The pain was real, but so was the liberation. Hiding that for so many years had poisoned me little by little. Now, though wounded, I could breathe. There was something new in the air. Something that felt like truth. Like life. I stood up slowly, excused myself, and left the room. I needed the dark hallway to find myself again. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes. I let the tears fall without rushing them. I had exposed my guts to those people. And now there was no shell left to protect me. As I walked back to the car, Andrew followed me in silence. We didn't need to say anything in that moment. He knew. And more importantly, I knew he was there. By my side. For the first time whole. The truth was exposed, but so was the pain. Now they knew. And nothing could ever be the same again. The invitation came in a simple note, left by Andrew on the table. "My mother would like to talk to you. Alone." For a moment I thought about refusing. The weight of everything we had been through was still on me. But something inside me wanted to hear what she had to say. I found Nicole in her garden, sitting in a wicker chair, her hands resting on her lap. She looked at me with a mixture of caution and sincerity. There were new wrinkles around her eyes, or maybe it was just the exhaustion of someone who fought against everything and, in the end, lost. I remained standing for a few seconds until she said, "Sit down, Amanda. Please." I complied. The wind blew gently, and the leaves fell as if they knew that time changes everything. Nicole took a while to speak. She wrung her hands as if gathering courage. "I never wanted to listen to you. But now, I need to." Her words were soft but heavy with an old weight. For the first time, there was no superiority in her voice. Just a desire to understand. To get closer. And I was ready for that. "I never wanted to listen to you. But now, I need to." The conversation wasn't easy. We went through long silences, emotional interruptions, and whispered confessions. She told me that, for many years, she believed that protecting Andrew meant pushing away any woman who didn't fit what she considered worthy. She realized too late that this was a form of control, and that love doesn't survive where there is dominance. I spoke of the pain of being judged without being known, of the loneliness of trying to fit in where I was never accepted. Nicole listened in silence, her eyes welling with tears. There was regret there, but also something more: vulnerability. She saw me, truly, for the first time. We touched on subjects I never imagined verbalizing with her. The trauma, the letters, the anxiety, the guilt. It all emerged as if this were the final chapter of a book that needed to be closed with dignity. There were no formal apologies, but there was listening. And for me, that was more powerful than anything else. When the final silence fell between us, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was serene, filled with understanding. We didn't hug. We didn't promise new beginnings. But I left there knowing that something had changed forever. Between silences and tear-filled eyes, something was being deconstructed. That night, I sat in my room and reread one of the letters I never delivered. The words still hurt, but in a different way, like scars that prove I survived. I picked up a pen, and at the bottom of the page I wrote, "I forgive. Not for her, but for me. Because I deserved that relief." I decided to leave the letter at her door the next day. And signed, without demands. Just a gesture from someone who chose not to carry the weight of others anymore. To forgive is to set yourself free. And in that moment I chose freedom. Peace. Myself. Andrew came home and found me smiling. A light, genuine smile. He didn't ask why. He just hugged me. And I knew that finally the cycle had closed. Not because everything was resolved, but because I no longer needed resolutions to move on. Outside the window, the world kept moving. And I moved with it. For the first time, without fear of what was to come. For the first time whole. I won't forget, Nicole. But I don't want to carry this with me anymore. It was the end of a cycle. But also the beginning of something I never imagined: peace. Now I'm curious about you who have listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the end screen that you'll also enjoy, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.